discussion this evening, I think, would be rather interesting if we were to divide it into two sections. The first part of the discussion will pertain to the background of this group and the Galaxy series. The second part of the discussion will include some of the concepts, the thoughts, the reactions of our space friends as we have interpreted them through our contacts that have now been going on since 1956. Before we go any further, I wish to take this opportunity to introduce to you one who is very dear to me, one who is, in my opinion, second only to the space friends themselves in the production of the communications that we've had the great honor and pleasure to have had through these years, Mr. Richard Miller. Would you stand just a moment, Richard, please? Perhaps I should define the Galaxy program. This talk this evening was to be based primarily on the story of Galaxy. I might explain for those of you who may have not heard about it that Galaxy is the name of a radio series of 13 broadcasts that is made up from the talks that our space friends have given us. This broadcast series was sent out over the air starting on the 21st, if I recall correctly, of last September and terminating on the 7th of December in 58. The story itself is rather interesting, we believe. However, before we go into that, let's see what happened before that time. The little group that originally got together back in 1955 or early 56 simmered down to about 7 in number at that time. Now, this group was made up of people who were very seriously, deeply interested in the investigation of space phenomena. When I say space phenomena, I mean the physical aspects, the so-called sightings of flying saucers and so on, and also the other phase of this whole project, namely the attempts at communication with space beings. This little group was rather a heterogeneous outfit, to say the least. The background of them, their backgrounds were entirely different, coming from many walks of life. Their daily activities are different, but the group did have that one common thing in mind, this interest in space phenomena. It happens, I might mention in passing, that among the experiences of this group, many of them had had the actual experience of contacting and communicating with space beings. Some of them through the medium of shortwave radio. Some through through the medium of a light beam instrument that was given to them by the space people, the design of it. Some of them by actual long-distance telephone communication, and some of them through this other means or mechanism that we will discuss a little more in detail later on, the so-called tensor beams. So you see, this group was kind of a mixed-up outfit, to say the least. About that time, around 1956, the group had been receiving many, many communications from our space friends, but in those days, most of the communications consisted of back and forth conversations. They'd say something and there'd be a question asked and a discussion. It was just a conversation, you might call it. But through these conversations, there were so many things that were told us, that were explained to us, so many thoughts, so many concepts that were so profound that one of the group said on one occasion, "It's too bad that here are just a handful of us getting this. I wonder if it wouldn't be possible if we were to ask our space friends to give us a talk or a series of talks that we could put on a tape, and then to those who would be interested in it, they could hear it too." They were contacted on the idea, and they said, "Oh, yes, of course, we'll be glad to do that. The only thing that we ask is that you submit to us a list of the subjects that you think your people that would interest your people," which of course we did. And from that list, they selected approximately 6 titles, 6 subjects about which they discussed in the form of a lecture. That was the origin, the beginning of these 6 original talks put out on 3 tapes that started out to be taped just for our sake, and then for Jim Jones, a friend of ours, and then Jim Jones heard it, and his wife heard it, and pretty soon somebody else heard it over here. And strange as it may seem, within a year, those tapes went all over the world. We've had many, many letters, many communications, many of the things that we've heard about them are interesting indeed. I don't know how many of you ever heard of them. One of the tapes was called Two Men of Earth, and another one was titled, that was by one by the name of Volca. Another one was titled Monica Speaks, in which this great space being, and one who's very close to us, gave the first talk, I think, that we knew of for the general public. It was rather a shaking thing. We thought in those days we didn't know Monica the way we know him today. Another tape was titled Earthman Come Home, which was the story of our early life, or life on this planet, in way back, before Atlantis and Lemuria, during that time and afterwards. The 4th tape, as I recall, was the story of Molbeck, which was the name that the space beings gave in their language for the planet that was destroyed, the planet that was at one time a part of our solar system and was located between Mars and Jupiter. The 5th tape was a talk life on Mars. Incidentally, this being of Mancha resides on Mars. And the sixth tape was a talk on international government. Those were the original tapes that went out. Well, after, I don't know, over a year, I would guess, there were many reactions. And then, of course, like all good things, it must come to an end. So we discontinued those tapes. After they were discontinued, the group more or less dissolved, and there were a few of us, however, who remained in communication with our space friends. All activities, as far as the public is concerned, were dormant. We passed out of the picture. Then about, a year and a half ago, perhaps, something like that, there were one or two more joined the group, and then communication started over. But this time, they were different. We observed marked changes. Now, these first tapes that came out, we thought in those days, and frankly, friends, to this day, we've never seen anything to surpass them in the way of thought provocation. But in spite of that, when our space friends began an intensive communication series with us the second time, we found a marked change in their subject matter. It started out with a series of personal instructions to us. Instructions that I'll have to confess to you were so far ahead of us that we couldn't comprehend them. I recall very clearly that this first instruction, they said would be very brief. They told us that we would assimilate this, we hoped, but they would not give us any further instruction until the group, all of the members of the group, had assimilated what this first instruction was. But believe it or not, when we received this, it was just a very short paragraph, all around one simple little word, identified. Identified. Well, now, we use that word all the time. We thought we knew what we were talking about and thinking about when we used this word. What a tragedy. So, when they were so specific in telling us that they wouldn't give us any further instructions until we had assimilated this, we thought maybe it might pay us to kind of look around a little bit and see what this thing's about. We did. Some of us went into some encyclopedias, and some read some very outstanding works from world thinkers. It was a revelation, to say the least, what we learned about identifying, the idea of identifying, how limiting it is, what it does not do, and so on. Well, I won't go into any further than that. That's the way the thing started out. In this past 2 years, we have received 6 of these instructions. It took months before we got the second one. So they are few and far between, to say the least. But they're all just as simple and just as potent as the first one, along different lines. Then, I would guess, in the latter part of February of last year, in one of our communications, our space friends made a very incidental remark. It was something like this. Before the year is out, you people will put out a radio series of 13 broadcasts. Well, you know that thing is crazy on the face of it. In the first place, none of us had the remotest idea of what goes to make up radio technique in production or in any other way. It was the farthest thing removed from our consciousness. So, like all typical humans, we proceeded to forget it. As a matter of fact, I don't believe at the end of the talk we could have told you to save our souls that they had made the statement. That's how much an impression it made. Well, time went on, and it wasn't until about the middle of August when, on this occasion, out of the clear blue, figuratively speaking and literally, they said, we are now ready to give you the information on the radio broadcast series. Are you ready? Well, then, of course, we began to delve into this thing. We realized we didn't know which way to turn because of the nature of the whole thing. They told us that it would be a series of talks that they would give to the public. Well, that on the face of it, it's kind of shaky when you think it's going to go out over the air. So they said, no, they made it clear to us, this isn't difficult. Don't get jumpy about it. All you need to do is so and so and so and so. Among them was this. Now, on the first broadcast, we were well aware that the first broadcast would either make or break the series. Naturally, because of the controversial nature of it, it had to be put up right. Now, what we suggest to you is this. You people, just each one of you, write what you think would be the best talk for the 15 minutes. And I am sure that we can mix these talks, and from it we'll get a good first broadcast. Well, there were 4 of us, as I recall, really tied into this thing. We made this, each one of us wrote what we thought was the talk. We went farther than that. We put it on, each one of us put it on a tape. We just did the job upright, I tell you. So, the night that we were to hear all these talks and pick the cream, of course, just among us, we wouldn't let anybody else know this, but each one of us felt, I'm sure, there's no use listening to the other guy's talk. It's no good. Mine's the only one. However, we were very gracious and very tolerant. Why, yes, let's hear yours. So this happened up at Arrowhead Lake. We were at a friend's house who had never heard anything about flying saucers, as far as we know, very little about them. So you can realize how shocked he was when this thing broke. We had a tape machine, and each one of us gave his talk. Oh, master, I tell you, it was good. But as we heard each one, we all realized that this was terrible. This was just awful. And about that time, our friend Monica said, my friends, we have heard your noble efforts in this matter. If you don't object, I will give you the first talk now. Just that quick, and away it went. Well, of course, the old tape machine was cranked up, and that made up the first talk of the radio series. I don't know whether any of you have heard it. It is in the form of a narration. It was narrated by one of us. But it was, in our opinion, one of the finest things because it was a critical subject, a controversial subject, and he treated it the best. So that was the beginning. Then the second talk. From then on we learned a lot, of course. And the second talk was one that was quite different. That was the talk that was to be given by Monka. Incidentally, I'll just read the list at this time of these talks. The first one was the introductory comments, as I said, narrated by one of the staff of Galaxy. The second talk was titled Methods of Communication. This was given by Monka, and it goes on to explain the different methods that they have of communicating with people on this planet. It's a very interesting and informative talk. He mentions the different ways, the light beam and the short wave and all these, including this telephone thing. Explains how they work, why they use certain types more than others, why they don't, why they refrain from using certain methods of communication. The third talk is a verbal tour of the largest broadcasting communication center in our solar system. It is located on Mars, and it is called KOR. This talk is given by another very great space being who goes with the title of Soltech. The fourth talk was a talk titled Power. It's a talk that gives a history of the use of electricity and particularly magnetism back through the ages on our planet. Back through ancient Egypt and way beyond. It is very interesting to say the least. That was narrated, by the way, by a member or a staff, member of the staff of Galaxy. The fifth broadcast was titled Magnetics. It was given by a space being, a space scientist, whose name is Bolarian. It too, he speaks as many scientists do. You're well aware, of course, that scientists, as they go, are not the world's best speakers. I mean as far as oratory is concerned. This man was no exception. He knew his subject. He speaks very rapidly. He speaks quite laconically. He never minces any words or uses one word too many. He impresses us as being kind of a nervous temperament, ready to go every minute. He, on some occasions, has made remarks of a little touch of satire, you might say, as a result of impatience on his part, because the people are maybe a little bit slow in thinking or a little bit slow to react. But even with that, it is a very interesting talk, and this man really knows his subject. The sixth talk was given by Monka. Again, this talk was titled Earth's Relation to the Other Planets of Our Solar System. In our opinion, this was the most radical talk of the whole 13. Now, I mean that in this way. Monka really doesn't pull his punches. He calls a spade, and there are quite a few spades. But it's very interesting. The seventh talk was titled The Great Pyramid, which is a description of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Who built it? When it was built? Why it was built? what is for the thing for which it is used today, its accurate dimensions throughout as it was originally built. And incidentally, we did some checking after we got that tape, and we found that many of the dimensions have changed very, very little. Some of them have been changed. But that is due to time and to the alterations that different pharaohs have made on the pyramid since that time. This talk, by the way, is given by one whose name is Klala. This being, by the way, is not from our solar system, but certainly a phenomenal being, a scientist to say the least. The eighth talk was a talk at the other end of the gamut. The pyramid was at one end of the gamut of mysteries, of old mysteries. The eighth talk was at the other end, the newest mysteries, spacecraft, in which he describes the different kinds of spacecraft that they use, their shapes, their capacities, their uses. It's very interesting, to say the least. This is also given by the same gentleman, Klala. The ninth talk is titled Profile of Man. That was given by one who is also very dear to us, one whose name is Haton. Incidentally, Haton is the one who gave the talk in the original tape series titled Earth Man Come Home. Those of you who heard that will recall the name and then the voice. The 10th talk was titled Life and Death. It was given by Monica. The 9th talk, by the way, to go back to it, is one that is rather philosophic in nature, but he does give us a picture, Haton does, of the development of consciousness through the different kingdoms. It is exceedingly thought-provoking. And Haton, to put it in the parlance of the street, has a terrific flair for oratory. He can really talk. The 10th in Life and Death by Monica was one of two that impressed us very, very deeply. Actually, because of the very profundity of the talk itself and the information that was given, we just could not confine it to a 15-minute program, which all the others were over the air. So that was put up in a half hour, for a half-hour broadcast. That one was one of the most beautiful talks, I think, in the series. One of the most beautiful. It gives us an insight on man and certainly his potential divinity. The 11th talk was titled The Green Emerald. It is only at the end of that talk that you really find out what planet Monica was discussing, the planet that he calls the Green Emerald. The 12th talk was a talk that was a little different in construction from the others, insofar that it was a series of questions and answers on spacecraft. You see, there have been so many people who were interested in that whole subject that it was thought that the 8th talk on spacecraft merely, you might say, what is their appetite? So it was decided by the powers that be